lot has been coming to light recently concerning David Lynn and his Christ Forgiveness Ministries. Evidence of sexual abuse. Many people coming out and sharing similar stories of being abused by him. And I know it's hard to receive allegations against someone you look up to that has touched your life, that you want to emulate. But the way that he's responding to these allegations is not only disgusting, but a red flag, calling these people witches and haters in order to discredit them. So I want to speak up. I have to speak up. As someone there that was there from the beginning, that started CFM with David Lynn, was one of CFM's first pastors, and was with David week after week, year after year, before he flew out anywhere, before there was any other CFM. Someone that was very close to him and probably knows him better than all of his followers and everyone that attends his church. I want to speak up and share how he did the same thing to me, that this is what he's always done, how he abuses people, to help you understand how he attracts people through his boldness and charisma and praise and the desire of people to serve the Lord for his own benefit. I met him in 2011. I had been saved for 2 years, and my evangelism ministry that I was a part of started going down to downtown Toronto and meeting all these evangelists and street preachers, and one of them was David. And I was very impressed. He was gifted and charismatic, but intrigued because he wanted to partner with me, with us, and start something together. And a lot of evangelists were interested because he wasn't saying that we should join his church and submit to him. He was saying we should unite and start something together, a ministry together, something powerful. But ultimately, a lot of these ministries left, and all that was left was the ministry that I was a part of, called Follow Me to Christ, and David. Because David had no followers. He had no disciples. He had no church. He said that he had tried to start a church called Christ Forgiveness Ministries many times, but that he had failed. Had fell apart, and he blamed his wife. So the question was, what do we call this ministry? And he said, I don't care. We said, we don't care. And he said, but my name, Christ Forgiveness, is already registered. All the legal work is done, so that's easy. We said, yeah, that makes sense. So that's what we called it. And we incorporated the ministry that I was part of, their name as well, until they left and they took their name with them. So what was left was me, David, and a young guy named Matthew. And we would meet and we would evangelize, and it was exciting times. And we would sit around in a circle and we'd fellowship. And David was like, we should read the Bible and worship together. We said, okay. And then time went by. He said, we should turn the chairs around and face the stage. We said, okay. And it's crazy to look back and realize how he deceived us and lied to us in order to start his own thing and to take over. But he came and said, we're having service. This is like a church. People are coming out. And we were like, yeah, like we're starting a church. Let's do it. And so me, David, and Matthew, week after week, we would go through what he had before for months. The statement of faith that he had before, and we rewrote it in a way that we all agreed. We went through his Bible study and said, is there anything that we feel needs to be added that is missing? And Matthew wrote a whole chapter on spiritual warfare that is still in there till today. And the final question was, what will be the leadership structure? And someone handed us an introduction to a book, Biblical Eldership by Alexander Stroth. And the idea was the senior pastor model is unbiblical. And the biblical model is a plurality of elders. Multiple pastors, all of which have equal authority and make decisions together. And that was appealing. And it is appealing. Because there's accountability in that structure. Nobody can take over and force their way. That's what we agreed on. And it was good. We had a strong bond. We started preaching through the statement of faith to tell people what our church was about. But then, David started making decisions on his own. So me and Matthew sat down with him and said, why are you not consulting us? And he said, it's not fair. I'm older, I have more experience, I should be able to make certain decisions myself. And it made sense to me. And I trusted him. And I did that for many years. Gave him the benefit of doubt. And he used my gullibility. I had no idea what the ramifications was of letting him make decisions. But Matthew was like, no. We made an agreement. You're breaking your word. And I was like, yeah, Matthew's right. And David wouldn't back down. He kept trying to persuade us that those who are older, we should honor them. And it's like, yes, but we made an agreement how we are going to lead this church. And he wouldn't back down. And he started using his preaching time to tear Matthew down. His position and his character. In the Bible, the reverence people had for those that were older than them and how they submitted, and there's rebellious people that don't want to do that. And what he was doing was he was trying to persuade me to take his side and persuade the congregation to take his side unknowingly and to submit to him and break Matthew down so that Matthew would change his mind. I didn't know all that. We didn't know all that. All we knew is he's talking about Matthew. So we approached him and said, what are you doing? And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not talking about Matthew. What are you talking about? And he was totally gaslighting us. Because he would do it again. And we would approach him and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he was making decisions. And he was slowly starting to take over. And he was starting to persuade me. But he was torturing Matthew. And we kept approaching him and he kept denying it. And Matthew was like, I'm done. I'm leaving. And David's like, well, you can't tell people why you're leaving because that would cause division. And he wanted him to lie. But he packaged it as, you're avoiding conflict. And he came up with the story, Matthew recently married and his wife is pregnant, he's taking a break. So Matthew agreed. And he left. But because he had said, I'm taking a break, after some time, he said, I want to come back. And David was like, I'll pray about it. And Matthew would leave for a month, come back, and David was like, I'm still praying about it. A couple of weeks, come back, I'm still praying about it. Until Matthew would get mad, or Matthew would send an email to some of the leaders about how David was treating him. And then David would say, see? I knew it. I knew I should have waited. You see that? And he would question Matthew's character. And he'd say to Matthew, you're being impatient, and you're not respecting what I'm saying, that I'm praying. And he was persuading me and others, and I was like, yeah, Matthew, what are you doing? And Matthew was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'll wait. And then this, again, I'm praying, and then Matthew would get upset. And then finally, I think this happened like 3 times, Matthew vanished. And I couldn't even get a hold of him for years. Even until after I left in 2018. But to think about what David did to this guy, in light of the fact that the whole time he was right. David broke his word. David lied to us. But David questioned Matthew's character. David made Matthew the bad guy. David abused Matthew and convinced someone that he was abusing to come and apologize to him. And got everyone, me and the other leaders, to turn against our brother when he was the one that broke his word. And Matthew was trying to hold him accountable. And David wouldn't let him back into the ministry that he helped start? For what? That is so twisted. But that is just a sample of what David continued to do for years to people. And looking back, there was no way he was going to let Matthew come back. He was just playing a game and spiritualizing it that he's praying. He wasn't going to let this guy come back and challenge his authority, because when he left, he started to refer to himself as senior pastor and me as associate, and go through these long stories about how this is his ministry that he started over 10 years ago in a basement and nobody would come. But he stayed faithful, and now God is rewarding him. Look at the people coming out to the church, and God is fulfilling the vision that he gave him. And it wasn't a strong ministry. It wasn't that many people. There wasn't a lot of leaders. But he had to prove that this was God. This was a move of God. That we are doing something no one else is doing. This is powerful. And he was able to do that because his vision was vague enough that he could keep adding to it. But if it was questioned, he would say, it's the vision that God gave. We have to honor it. And in order to prove that this was a move of God, he had to overwork us and overburden us and keep changing the vision. Everyone has to evangelize. We're an evangelistic ministry. It was forced, demanding. But then he started getting views on YouTube for his street preaching. And the focus from homeless ministry and evangelism went to street preaching. Everyone has to street preach on a microphone. And then everyone has to street preach on a microphone and have a booth. And then everyone has to street preach on a microphone, have a booth, and record themselves and then upload it. And he just kept adding more and more. And it's like, what's going on? And he's like, this was always the vision. And he found out about foldable gospel booths. And he wanted 12 at every subway station downtown 7 days a week. And people would cry out and say, we're burnt out. We can't handle this. Everything's falling apart. Nothing is consistent. We're discouraged. And he'd take a time out, and a week later he'd start again. Because the image that he was presenting to other leaders and other people was that his ministry was working. It was effective. And so he had to keep that going. But it was lies and exaggerations. We're out there 7 days a week, winning so many people to Christ, and people are being discipled. We weren't out there 1 day a week consistently. No one was coming to Christ. And people were not being discipled consistently and properly. In fact, he was taking no ownership. He was yelling at people. He was shaming people. And it was his fault. Things were falling apart. But he was blaming people for not being committed enough. He was blaming people for not being faithful enough. But this is how he made us continue. From the pulpit, twisting scripture, he conditioned us to tolerate mistreatment. God chastises those he loves. You think I'm being harsh with you? This is tough love, like my football coach in high school. I used to think he was so mean, but he was trying to make me strong. This is what it means to pick up your cross. This is the hard life. What do you want to do? You want to be a Sunday Christian? And he was grooming us to accept, internalize toxic narratives that he was feeding us. To not leave. To not question. To not listen to concerns that people had. To see correction and criticism as an attack from the enemy. And it was twisted. He would mess with our minds. You're free to go. Not everyone can handle what God is doing here. But why would you want to go? Don't you want to be used by God? Why would you want to abandon your brothers and sisters? Forcing us to live in denial. Because it wasn't like everything was great and one thing was wrong and we were being negative like he was saying. Everything was wrong. And one thing was good. And we were saying there needs to be change, and he wasn't listening. And he was shutting us down. And what that did to us is it kept us from telling other people the truth. Sharing what was happening with us because we wanted to present the ministry as powerful. We didn't want to in his words, agree with the opposers. We didn't want to give fuel to the haters. And we cut off people outside the ministry that cared about us. Because this type of mentality kept us from them, but if they had concerns, we would cut them off as haters. Our only support, the people that could help us. We were isolated. And the only voice that we had, the only narrative that we had, that was David. Telling us that this was a move of God. So this is what he did with us. But it got worse. Because people would leave. And he would go on long stories about how he loves God and he's given everything to God, and people keep backstabbing him and turning against him, and he'd turn on us and he would say, and if you leave, I'll be here serving the Lord by myself. And we should have been smarter and said, the eye cannot say to the body, I don't need you. But we were like, we're not going to betray him. So we internalized this toxic narrative that even if he wasn't there, we're like, we can't talk to people. We can't tell people. We can't say anything negative. We don't want to betray. We want to be faithful. No Christian wants to be unfaithful. And he would use that. He would capitalize on those desires, those godly desires. But as I said, it got worse because he started to get really popular and he started to become more crude. Yelling at people for not raising their hands. One time saying, or many times saying, if you're not here to worship God, then get out. And he became popular and he wanted to travel and teach people how to evangelize when our church was falling apart. And he did. And he came back a week later and he's like, I planted a CFM church. And he was unchurching people to join an evangelism group that he was calling a church. And it's like, you can't do that. You can't plant a church in a week. You can't plant a church when your church is falling apart. How are you didn't test these people. You put them in charge. You're going to hurt these people. But he made me feel like I'm disagreeing with people giving their lives to the Lord. And he would go on stage and he would talk. And this is how he brainwashed us, because he would go on and on and on about how we're making an impact and difference. And he would use scripture and he would talk and Bible study, prayer meeting and sermon. And his sermons weren't 30 minutes long. They were 3 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. And you can't sit there and not be brainwashed. And if I disagreed with him, he would go and go and go and go until he broke me down. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to oppose what God is doing. But that was the pattern with me and him, that I kept standing up and saying, you're mistreating people. What you're doing is wrong. You're overburdening us. And every time I'd go to correct him, I'd leave feeling confused. I'd leave apologizing to him. And I was like, this happened for years. And I'm like, what's going on? I'd go in there and he'd confuse things. You don't know what happened. Do you know? Do you understand? Do you know? That's what you saw, but you don't know his heart. Like, how do you know? What he said was fact. What I said, he could interpret 50 different ways. Are you sure? Make me doubt my perception, my discernment. And he'd love bomb me. I love you. I support you. And he'd guilt trip me. And after all I've done for you, this is the way you treat me? And he'd get me. One way or another, he'd get me. I'd be like, I'm sorry. And he'd be like, that's okay. I support you. I love you. I believe in you. You're so smart. You're so wise. And I'd leave and I'd be like, nothing was dealt with. Things are the same as before. And this is what he did to many people. He triggered them, made them look crazy. He demonized them. People wouldn't believe them. This is what he did to his wife. He would do things and say things that he knew would trigger her, and then he would step back and act totally calm while she got upset and reacted. And he was like, see? She's mistreating me. He always made himself the victim and found a way to blame others. And this is ultimately why they got divorced, because they couldn't get along. But this is what he was doing to me. And it was really hard for me, because I had received counsel that if I'm being called to Middle Eastern ministry, to the underground church, which I felt I was, I shouldn't be on camera. And he told me it's ridiculous, I'm walking in fear, and he was hesitant to take my videos down and give it to somebody else. He doesn't have time. But now he had planted all these CFMs and he was traveling and going away. And he's like, we need to support them. And I was on my own, working full time to support myself, had my own issues and problems, and I was going at it. And I was trying to be faithful while dealing with the mess that he had made. He wouldn't deal with sin. He wouldn't correct abusers. He'd push away strong leaders that we desperately needed, and he'd hold tightly to these abusive men that were abusing people. And instead of correcting them, he would defend them and promote them. And he'd be like, oh, we're all growing. And he'd find a way to sit on the fence and not offend anybody. And I was suffering. I was battling depression, panic attacks, and doing so much all my free time, trying to carry this church, dealing with people that don't respect me, are being abusive to me, and him not defending me, making accusations, and him not standing up for me. To the point that I got sick and I needed an operation. I got sick and I needed an operation. I'm overworking and I'm still thinking I'm not doing enough. I could do more. This is the conditioning that he had me go through. I remember before I got sick, I reached out to him. I said, David, I need you. And he said, you don't need me, you need God. Shut me down. And I was on my own. I had no one. I had no friends. But he did this to other people, and I couldn't take it anymore. And when he came back, he wasn't there. He was always on video, videotaping everything, doing live with these other CFMs. Videotaping everything. Eating pizza. Hey, we're eating pizza. Hey, we're here. Hey, we're there. And he would always point the camera to my face. And he'd be like, whoops. I remember me and my fiance at once outdoor service, we had to go sit behind bushes for the whole service because he was like waving the camera everywhere, just so inconsiderate. And I couldn't take it. I kept speaking up more, and he was trying to use his position, pastor, overseer, founder, to shut me down and say, why are you questioning me? Why are you disagreeing with me? Why? Because you are using people. You're hurting people. And then finally, there was the final straw. We had a leader in the West End, all by himself. He was holding down evangelism for like 2 years, and David was supposed to be there to mentor him and support him, and he was not. Because David couldn't do what he was expecting people to do. He was so disorganized and late all the time and tardy. He couldn't handle it, but he expected people to handle it and be like, how hard is it to evangelize? So this leader had called him out and said, on your videos, you're mocking Muslims. You're putting people down for the way that they dress. And Dore is doing the same. Dore Love. Something needs to be done about it. And David had told him, I'll do something about it, but he had done nothing about it for a year. And this West End leader was like, nothing has been done. I'm praying what I need to do. This is not a godly representation. This is confusing. And what did David do? What he always does. He went down there to the West End and turned the tables on the guy. Started finding fault with him. Wrote a wrong email saying he's dividing. It seems like he's starting his own thing. And he found a way to blame the guy and change the subject. And I wrote an email. I said, you're making assumptions and accusations. We need to meet with this guy. David was like, okay, when I come back, we'll meet. But then he flipped a month later, and he refused to meet. Well, he's left. I work with people that want to work with us. Those that don't, I wish them well. We're not meeting. When you make accusations, you have to meet. No. Not giving the guy a chance to defend himself. And I was like, I'm sick of this. Member after member, leader after leader, you do this to them. They're offended by you. They're hurt by you. And you find a way to blame them. You're good with your words, David. But while you're winning arguments, making yourself seem right, you're losing people that love you. And I was upset. And he turned it on me. I'm so hurt. You're taking the side of our opposers. Don't let this divisive spirit get a hold of you. And then he sent me an email. When I come back, I'm going to go through a list of your responsibilities because I'm your accountability. Totally flipped it on me. And I had met with Harold, the accountant, and I met with this West End leader. And we were like, David is out of control. He is so proud. No one can talk to him. Something needs to be done. And Harold was like, well, he's also been doing whatever he wants with the finances. We've been advertising for homeless ministry and the building fund. And in 2 months in the UK, he depleted all of our money, all of our savings. Because he gets a salary, but he has the ministry card and he spent it all. And he was furious. And I was like, there has to be accountability. And then David came and he shut out this West End guy. And I started praying. What I should have done a long time ago, put my foot down and say when there's sin and there's no repentance, and not be manipulated. God started speaking to me. I'm neglecting what he's called me to do, and there's rampant abuse here. So when David came back, I sat in his apartment and I said to him, you're hurting people. You're mistreating people. And you're using your title to justify it. You're telling people to do one thing and you're doing something else. You got me going through your marriage counseling course for months because that's your requirement to marry people. But you talk to a lady in a third world country for a month and then you go to meet her in a foreign country and you call me less than a week later that you're married? Like, you have no accountability in your life. And I told him, God has called me to leave. And he said, why would God call you to leave when we need you here? And I'm like, because the church is bigger than CFM. God can call me wherever he wants. And I said, look, God is calling me to leave. But I want to be honest about why I'm leaving. I don't know how to do that. And I need your help. His face changed. It's like he became possessed, like he completely changed. And he's like, so you want to slander me before the church? And I was like, no. What I said was, I want to leave, but I want to be honest about why I'm leaving. I don't know how to do that. I need your help. And he said, you want to slander me before the church? He got up, kicked me out of his house. I said, we can meet again. And he said, I'll think about it. And we didn't meet again. We just kept talking on text. And I was trying to hold him accountable. And we just kept going in circles. And I was like, this is what you're doing. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. What am I doing? What are your issues? I don't even know what your issues are. I was like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then he would change the topic and be like, after everything I've done for you, I did this for you, I did this for you, I let you stay at my house, I did this for you, and this is the way you treat me, you betray me? And I was like, thank you. Thank you for all that you did for me. And I wasn't falling for it this time. I was like, but that's irrelevant to the issues that I'm trying to hold you accountable to. He's like, I don't even know what the issues are. And like, we kept going to this, and I'm like, does this guy not have scroll that he could go read what I just wrote 10 minutes ago? But he knew what he was doing. I didn't know what he was doing. And I just kept frustrating myself. And I was like, that's it. Who's your accountability? And he said, Marlon and Sean, his high school friends. And I said, how are they your accountability if Harold told me that they quit a month ago? And he lied, but I didn't know. He lied that they hadn't quit. It's like, fine. So I reach out. Sean's not responding to me. Marlon responds. And he said, write out a list of your issues. So I wrote out a letter with my issues. And I kept that with him. Reach out to Harold. Harold, what happened with the finances? He goes, it's dealt with. How? He goes, it's actually my fault, not his. Harold, why are you lying? How is it your fault that he spent the money? Harold goes, I just don't want him to be slandered before the church. And I'm like, those are the same words as David. David is slandering me and getting people to stop talking to me. And at the same time, he's making it so hard for me at the church. Talking about me on the stage. And I'm telling him, stop. I'm tired of you calling yourself founder. When we started this together, he's like, you want to steal my ministry? I'm like, I don't want your ministry, but just be honest. Like, you're lording your title. And he's talking about me on stage and doing sermons about how God always calls one person to lead. And he's going on leadership groups and saying, whoever does not evangelize and go on video will be kicked off. And I'm just like, wow. And Harold starts pressuring me. If God called you to leave, did God call you to leave? Then why are you still here? Like, I'm in an accountability process, Harold. And reach out to Marlon. I haven't heard from you. He's like, well, David said you're leaving, so that's it. David had done the same thing. This guy didn't want to talk to me. What do you mean that's it? Well, you're leaving, so you got to leave it to someone else. Maybe talk to him down the road. So you're telling me if I'm leaving, I can't hold this guy accountable? That if I want to hold him accountable, I have to stay? Yeah. I'm not staying. And this is how they manipulate me. I'm like, fine. That makes sense. That doesn't make sense. You can hold someone accountable. You don't have to stay there and endure the abuse. But I called David. I said, Marlon said this. I'm going to let it go. Let's set a time for me to leave. And he wouldn't let me leave. Kept setting a date. A couple days before, a week before, he's like, I forgot. We're doing something that weekend. Oh, I forgot. I'm going somewhere that weekend. He kept doing this again and again. And then I was like, that's enough. Set a date. And he set a date. And a week before, he goes, I forgot I invited a guest. I'm like, that. No. Let the guest preacher come. I'm leaving. That week. And that week, he put on such an act that we're like best friends. And he framed photos of us. And he gifted it to me. And I was like, and I went along with it. And I didn't say nothing. And I left. Finally, in 2018. And I had to deal with all of these things. I had to battle all these things. Am I betraying him? Did I do the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? Like, is he right? Am I crazy? And what am I doing with my life? I'm not in the streets all the time. Like, I'm wasting my time. Am I really serving God? I had to fight these things. And then I went through a situation with my family where they were really abusive and vile towards me and my wife. And they would not take ownership, and they were blaming it on me. And not acknowledging what they done. You did that. No, I never did that. And it's like, what? And someone started counseling us, and they're like, look up manipulation, look up narcissistic personality disorder. And I started learning about gaslighting. And I was like, this is a thing? I've been going through this all my life. I went through this at CFM with David all those years. This is a thing? Like, I'm not crazy? It was a big relief. But then I started looking back and thinking of what he had done to people and seeing the patterns and looking at his videos and evangelism videos and seeing how he manipulates people, and I couldn't stop seeing. I couldn't help but see it. And a couple years passed by. We exchanged some messages, and I get 3 calls from David back to back, and I'm like, what's this? I don't answer. And the next day, Harold messages me. And he goes, you guys were best friends. You should reconcile. And I'm thinking, maybe Harold's right. And then I find out, well, I called David. Why'd you call me? And he goes, nothing. I just wanted to see how you are. You called me 3 times. Are you sure? Yeah, I just wanted to see how you are. Okay. Then I find out that he was lying. The day that he was calling me was the day that one of his leaders had stepped down. And then people started reaching out to me. David did this to me. Harold did this to me. He took my side. He turned on me. Someone was abusing me. David defended them and promoted them. And someone else. And I'm just like, whoa. It's like, what is going on? This has happened. This has continued to happen. Abusing people, controlling people. And I'm just like, This is terrible that this continued. I'm not alone. So I messaged Harold. I'm like, I can't reconcile with someone who's unrepentant, who treats people this way. And you're a liar. You cover up for him. He's like, what do you want me to do? I'm like, I'm not playing games with you. When someone's in sin, go read the Bible and figure out what to do. And I told David, we need to talk. And I called him and I said, Harold has been reaching out to me. And I told him we can't reconcile. He's like, oh, I didn't know. Let me call Harold. He calls Harold, calls me back. Oh, Harold says that you want to slander me before... You want him to slander me before the church. I'm just like, first of all, Harold's a liar. And second, I need you to stop contacting me. And stop trying to keep tabs on me. Until you repent. Like you're continuing to hurt and abuse people. And the whole time, every time he opened his mouth, it was just confusion and deception. He was just like, I don't know what you're talking about. Stop contacting me. You're contacting me. And I'm just like, I don't even know why you left. But I remember that you hurt me. And I'm getting so upset every time he opens his mouth. And he's just like, maybe I'm blind. Maybe I'm blind and I can't see and you're trying to force me to see when I'm blind. But you know what? You're blind. We're all blind. And I'm just like, you're such a deceiver, man. Here's my letter. I'll send it to you on WhatsApp. Read the issues. You say you don't know what they are? He knew. He's like, maybe I'll read it. I'm like, the problem with you is that you do whatever you want whenever you want. And he's like, because I'm the founder, dude. And I'm like, there you go. This is an ungodly attitude. Do not contact me if you're not going to repent. Got off the phone and he does not listen. Continues to message me. I forgive you. Forgive me if I ever hurt you. Messaging me. Finding my wife's number, messaging her. Contacting my friends, talking to them. Why has Ben slandering me? I told him on that conversation, I will tell people. They reach out to me, I will tell them what you've done, what you're doing. People contacting me, oh, he's uploading videos of you. This is like harassment. But this is what he does. So I am so relieved that people are starting to speak out. Because what he does to people is he gets them not to talk. People that are leaving, he convinces them that if they talk, they're causing division and slandering. So people leave without saying anything. People leave repeating his lies. Oh, it was good. No church is perfect. This is not about perfection. This is people being hurt and abused. That's not normal. But people leave not being able to help other people, to confirm what other people are going through, and not being able to confirm that what they went through was wrong. Not being able to heal. And this is how he has gotten people to stay silent and cover up his abuse for years by convincing people not to say anything, and he gets the last word. He gets to slander them and demonize them, and they can't say nothing. Well, people are speaking up, and I'm so glad. And that's why I have to speak up, because I have to tell you, asking people why they left is not gossip. Sharing about why you left is not slander. This is deception. Do not believe it. Learn about manipulation. Understand these things. Do not believe what David says. And be very weary of engaging him and trying to correct him. He will minimize. He will confuse. You are not ready for the manipulation skills that he's been honing for years. You are not playing the same game. There's a limit to how far you will go to try to prove your point. He does not have that limit. You are trying to be truthful and honor the Lord. He is not. He will lie. He will try to destroy you. He will do whatever. He will go to great lengths. Even if he hurts you, to shut you down and derail you. And the perfect example is on the Unfollowing David Lynn, the sexual abuse video, where this young lady was coming to him to say she was sexually abused, and he had not responded to her. And he had the audacity to try to guilt someone saying they're sexually abused, telling them, you don't care about me, and bold-faced lying. I have not had a vacation or a break in more than 20 years. Wow. This is just shameless. Everybody knows he takes breaks. He took multiple vacations when I was there. But to try to guilt trip an abuse victim, he has no limit. Do not believe what he says. I recently met someone, an elderly person, who was an evangelism leader at one of the most popular churches in Toronto, a church that David went to when he was young. And when I had met David had said that he was a senior evangelism leader at that church. And this older person told me, because he was going there at the same time, David was never an evangelism leader. He never even finished the evangelism course. And to look back and see that he was lying from the very beginning, that this guy lies and he has no conviction, he slanders people and defames people, turns people against each other, he's the one causing division. He does not care about the truth. This is not a man of God. This is someone chasing fame and trying to protect their image, and will destroy you to do that. So be very cautious and reach out for help. Reach out to me. I'm on Facebook. Ben Eftek, E-F-T-E-K. I will help you. I will support you. I will confirm if he's telling you lies or if he's trying to manipulate you. I would be glad to. Because more people need to speak out. Because when I found out that I wasn't crazy, because that's what gaslighting does to you. It makes you doubt your God-given discernment. A burden lifted off me. I was relieved. And people need to know that. They're not crazy. What they're going through is not good. It's not normal. It's not healthy. They're being robbed. Of their passion. And I asked anybody that I took sides against, took David's side against them, did not believe them, forgive me. God bless you. Spiritual abuse is heinous because the gospel is beautiful. Christ took blows. He died and rose again to set us free from our sin, from our condemnation, from our old deceptive ways, in order to make us ministers of reconciliation, those that bring people to Christ rather than push them away. So please, don't allow David to make you like him, indifferent to people's pain, treating people as if they don't exist because they disagreed and left. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery.